Welcome to the Wake Up Call Live, where we have authentic, action-oriented conversations about creating truly inclusive workplaces where people feel they belong. Hi, I'm Laurie Battaglia. I'm the CEO of Aligned at Work, and each month I sit down with change makers that are navigating the difficult waters of life and work. We dive deep into what's working, what isn't, and what's next in leadership and life. It's about real people and real impact. I invite you to be part of the conversation. You can put a question or a comment in the box and we'll be happy to address it on the show. Your voice matters. I can't wait for you to meet today's guest. And here we are. I am so excited today to be talking to my friend and colleague that I met a couple of years ago, Janéa Jackson. She's the CEO of HomeRise, which is an organization in San Francisco that deals with really big issues like homelessness, affordable housing, and I'll let her describe everything else. As you saw in the intro, I'm Laurie Battaglia, and I'm the CEO of Aligned at Work. We're headquartered in Scottsdale, Arizona. We're nationwide and over in the UK and in Canada as well. And we work with organizations that are really serious about creating cultures of belonging because they know that's the way of the future. So, Janéa, we met, 2 years ago as you were ready to take on this challenge. And we met at Leading Age California's annual conference, a place that I love going and speaking. And you were in my session. We talked afterwards, and you were leaving a government position to go take over as CEO. So, tell us about you. Tell us about why you would leave a perfectly good job and go to something that was such a challenge for you and for others.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, firstly, thank you for having me today, Laurie. We've talked about this for a long time. I'm so happy that it came to fruition, and we're having some really important talks and some really important times. So again, thank you for having me today.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, so I was a 15-year federal government employee. Absolutely loved the work I was doing, was in my dream job at HUD, the one I had dreamt of in undergrad kind of situation. And I got this really cool opportunity to help a struggling nonprofit turn, itself around. And I really took it as probably like the biggest challenge of my life. To pull this off. And really what drew me to it is that, we have 16 properties that we own, manage, and do wraparound services for in San Francisco. We house all formerly homeless individuals, San Franciscans. We have 2 more properties that we do just resident services, just wraparound services for another partner. And this organization is such an incredible and important resource, not just to San Francisco, but like the Bay Area.
Yeah.
So it could not fail. It cannot fail. Mm-hmm. And it was failing. When I came in and took over this organization, we were basically bankrupt. And some really dramatic things needed to change pretty quickly in order to make sure this 35-year-old nonprofit was going to continue to be around for another 35 years and be able to help, more and more people. Mm-hmm. So it was a really difficult situation in terms of like a pivot, right? Because I'm going from a very structured environment to a nonprofit that, frankly was like a little on the chaotic side. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I really function, I had a career that first started off working in DOD, which is like very, very structured, very, very organized. And to add to that, I worked a lot of my time in an engineering command, right? So order and structure, systems. Yeah. And then moved to a nonprofit that I felt really could benefit from a lot of the experiences, the lessons, the technical skills that I've learned working in those kinds of environments, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of a labor of love to make a decision to jump into something where I knew I was going to be very uncomfortable initially, but also where I could make a huge impact and hopefully a very lasting impact. So happy to be here, happy to be serving. It's been 2 years as of June 1.
Yeah, just past your anniversary. Were there moments in time where you thought you wouldn't make it to 2 years, or was it just blissfully easier than you thought?
No, actually, I did my due diligence. I sat down with a very respected person here in San Francisco that was running a very large, very well-respected organization that is a national organization.
Nice.
And, that person sat me down and said, hey, look, give it 8 months and you're going to have to find yourself another job. You're going to be winding this organization down.
Wow.
And so that was my I'm stubborn, right? Like I like to win.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
like to get things done. And I like to, I'm always shooting for the underdog, like period. And I was like, I'm gonna prove him wrong.
Mhm.
And so I knew, like, coming in my first day, how big this task would be and how important it would be and how many people would be watching to see if we would even be around in another year.
Yeah.
And I'm really proud that, we're here 2 years later.
Mhm.
Our key performance indicators, like our business indicators, are doing much better than what they were 2 years ago. I'm just proud of the work that we're doing. And, we've been able to put some really important mechanisms in place to extend, our runway out, many more years.
Yes.
And a lot of that had to do with, tenacity and grit, not just on my part, but also on the part of our team. We brought in some great new folks, and, we had, old timers who were like, hey, I get it. Like, things have to change for us to have change.
Yeah.
And, of course, there's some folks who got off the bus too, and they weren't, there for that, didn't want to be around for it, and that's perfectly fine. That's what you need as well, right?
Right.
But we had to build a really cohesive team that worked well together, that understood the assignment and was willing to make a lot of operational changes to make it happen and work in an austere environment. I think that was the huge thing for us was, guys, we're writing on the wall, like financially, like we shouldn't be here. So we have to move in an austere environment and then, behave like who we are so that we can dig ourselves out of this and do better and grow again.
Yeah. And you've got a couple hundred relying on you to keep things going from an employee perspective. Yes, I don't recall the size, but I know it's over 100 employees.
We're at full strength. We'd be at like 210-ish.
There you go.
Yeah, we usually fluctuate between like 175 and like 190.
Yeah. And it's an important thing for you as a CEO to have their best interest at heart at all times. And I'm always, whenever I talk to leaders, some get it with the impact that they have, that ripple effect that you have if you treat somebody poorly or it's so uncertain. Not everybody wants to sign up for that task, as you said. But it's so uncertain. I think a lot of times as leaders, we have to think about the ripple effect that we have, that the way we treat this person is the way then that they go out and treat others in their world or total strangers or any of that. It's a big task to have all that on your back.
That's so true. And, at the end of the day, like our mission is to house formerly homeless folks and help them rise up and become the best version of themselves. It's really hard to do that if you don't have a staff that feels secure and a staff that doesn't feel like they can be all that they can be in their working environment. And so, that's complicated, right? It's complicated in this day and age because we had 3 years being in the pandemic, where folks didn't want to interact with people. Folks, wanted to work from home, and, real estate is a people business. And, really like resident services and the support that we give people, it's a face-to-face business. And, people were concerned about living their own, like surviving, right?
Yes. Yes.
So that was complicated in itself, right? And, I always say that, organizations that didn't have good processes and procedures going into the pandemic were going to fail during the pandemic. I was really fortunate that I had, some God-sent foresight when I was at HUD to kind of put in a place we did a lot of working groups. We did a lot of just process and procedure stuff. We had like tracking systems in place. All of that fell into place before we went into the pandemic. So when we all got home, we were working more efficiently, faster, and with better quality outputs. But that was because of the work that we had done, those years before going into the pandemic. You couldn't have planned for that,
Right.
It was just a good fortune, This organization didn't have that good fortune. And so a lot of things just fell to the wayside, not intentionally, right? It's just the systems weren't there. And then coming out of the pandemic, right, and having everybody come back into work and, having expectations that we go back to like doing business face to face. This, it was traumatic for a lot of people.
Yes. Yes.
So recognizing that, was, difficult in terms of like doing change management because, again, like we were almost like bankrupt basically. So and it was like, hey, like this is a do or die situation. Like we don't have, a lot of time to help you wrap your feelings around what needs to happen here. You're
in crisis mode. Yeah.
Yes. And in addition to that, we have a really interesting population that we work with, right? So HomeRise, a part of our core values is that we believe that everybody can rise up and be the best version of themselves, whatever that means to them. So if someone's ready to work and they're one of our residents and, they, qualify for our jobs, we employ our residents. In addition, we have a lot of folks who are second chance employees that have spent, decades in prison from everything from, theft to murder, and have came and worked for HomeRise and have served in capacities where they're some of our best employees, and then you have folks who, gone the traditional, white collar route and have the degrees and, all of the certifications and accolades and all that sort of stuff. So we have a lot of different cultures, different points of view, of like how you work and how you work with people, which also makes for a really different kind of working environment where different kinds of support are needed for your staff. Oftentimes, the kind of support that our residents need, our staff also needs as well.
I wondered. Yeah. Because if I'm coming out of either homelessness, and correct me if I'm wrong, because this may just be from my own perspective, but I would wonder if somebody was coming out of homelessness or coming out of prison after a long time being there, what would today's workplace demand of them, and a highly demanding role anyway, dealing with population that helping the population that you help. How do you onboard them? How do you make sure that they get in and have the best chance they can of success there?
Right. I think where we're really fortunate is because we have such a core number of folks with that background. And honestly, a lot of folks already know each other. They know each other from prison, or they know each other from being on the streets or even living in our housing because they're already part of our community. That peer-to-peer support, I think, has been huge for HomeRise. But having that said, too, what I was seeing was a lot of silos, right? Because people will click up where they're comfortable, right? And then also, folks will have different biases towards different things because that's traumas that they're still having to work through themselves that show up at work.
Yep.
So we have like excellent healthcare, excellent mental health supports through our healthcare system, our healthcare insurance. We have, the EAP, it's Employee Assistance Program. That's, generous. And I'm saying generous because I've never seen packages
One like that.
we have in my prior, workplaces.
Yeah.
It's all there for a reason, and it's exactly to make sure that, people have the resources that they need. But what's also really beautiful is because folks have lived experience, their ability to connect with our residents and to, for the residents to feel like they're seen and someone like truly knows their experience, I think is what makes us like so special. We have like a 95%, no, sorry, it's 98% retention rate.
Amazing.
That means 98% of our folks, if they stay with us long term. So when people attrit, unfortunately, they're attriting due to overdoses, or they're leveling up into like vouchers, Section 8 buildings, or or just getting their own place because they have an income and can now pay somewhere else. And I think a lot of our success in terms of outcomes and impacts in with our residents has to do with the fact that we have quite a few staff, I would say close to 40%, who can really connect with the residents' experiences.
That's really key. Can you walk us through, if someone comes to HomeRise, what situation are they in? How do they sort of get through your system? What kinds of support do you give to them?
Yeah, great question. So we actually don't hold wait lists in HomeRise, or we're part of the coordinated entry program, and then also the San Francisco Housing Authority holds their wait lists for their units. So we actually get referrals through those two different systems. So if someone was to walk up to our building and say, hey, I want to move into this building, can you show me a unit? We would actually refer them to a navigation center.
Got it.
And they would do the intake. They would find out, if they have other family members. They would find out, whatever information they're willing to disclose to help, kind of the coordinated entry program decipher what kinds of support they might need and what buildings might be best fit for them. And then we then get the referrals from the city and the housing authority. And then at that point, we'll show the unit, we'll, introduce them to the staff, we'll really try and help sell them on why like our community is where they want to be and why like we're different. And, hopefully the resident chooses to, live with us. And, the resident is a resident. They have a lease. They're responsible for paying rent. That rent can be up to 30% of their income. And if they don't have income, it's at minimum $25. And there's house rules that they will sign off on. There's pet addendums, just like if you were to go rent anywhere else. It's the same kind of concept. It's independent living with support services.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds. I did not realize that's an interesting thing. So then, if I were in this pipeline and I was sent to you, I could say no, I don't like it here, and go to option 2 if I really wanted to.
Yes, you could.
That's pretty cool. Okay. So what are some of the things that you've had to adjust to? Like, I know when you go into a job, you think it's one thing and then you get in there and it's something else. So how has this transition and the 2 years and everything, what surprised you? Happy or otherwise?
I think what surprised me. So I think the biggest surprise was the model, the permanent supportive housing model.
Yeah.
The model itself is brilliant.
Yeah.
It's where we take people as they are, right? So whether you're pimping, using, whatever, like we're
Mhm.
gonna, you're welcome. We're taking you as you are, no questions asked. The model in itself is brilliant. It meets people where they're at. It gives them the support that they need and time, and support to turn their lives
Dignity.
around.
Yeah.
Right.
Treated with
You
dignity.
know,
Yeah.
the problem is the model is not cheap. It requires it to be fully funded to work. And so what we're seeing right now is that lack of funding.
Mm. Yeah.
And also very much so a pivot towards folks just not wanting to see homeless people on the street, period.
Right.
So a lot of focus on shelters, which is not a long-term solution.
Yep.
Shelters are not designed for people to stay there forever.
No.
And they are not designed to, really give people like a dignified way of living. It's supposed to be interim.
Yeah. An emergency more. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so we're seeing a lot of the funding shift to that and not addressing the aging housing stock, permanent supportive housing stock.
Yes.
Insurance rates are just astronomical and are in itself making a lot of the buildings go into the red.
Mm-hmm.
And, the fires and, all this,
Yes.
global warming and the disasters that are happening across the country,
Right.
are huge players in why that's happening. And really, there not being any strong, interventions at the state or federal level of addressing the rising insurance rates.
Mm-hmm.
So that, I think that was surprising and disappointing
Mm-hmm.
at the same time. And the need to really advocate for this permanent solution and the funding to back it.
Yeah.
There's, we have folks who, level out of our housing. We just had like a couple of months ago, a woman who graduated from San Francisco State, with 3 kids and got a job at San Francisco State, ended up getting a beautiful apartment not too far away from campus, got a Section 8 voucher, it was, and we moved out of the Tenderloin out of one of our units, we have a lot of success stories like that, but people need, that runway to have that time to really put their lives together to make that level up, and then on the flip side, there's going to be folks who aren't going to be able to do that for a myriad of different reasons. It might be, mental health reasons, it might be, that they're just not, for whatever reason, employable, or able to make enough money to live independently on their own.
Yes.
And that's who permanent supportive housing, needs to continue to support and provide that service so they're not back out on the street.
Right.
Like, we need to focus on housing retention. We need to focus on, whatever traumas that they might have that will help them live better in permanent supportive housing.
Yes.
So I think that was the biggest disappointment coming in, was that there's not enough rallying around this model. There's actually a lot of the opposite kind of energy. And I think folks not understanding, if this model doesn't exist, what you're going to see on the street and what's going to end up at the curb of your house too,
Yes. Yes.
So I think that was my biggest disappointment and why we advocate so strongly for permanent supportive housing.
Mm-hmm. When have you gotten funding cut because of federal government cuts after the new administration came in? Have you been feeling that? Is it cut? Like, where does all your funding come from? I'm guessing it's private, it's government, it's state and federal. But where have you seen, you mentioned that, part of it, but have you seen governmental cuts to your funding?
Right. So from the federal level, the COC funds are what's kind of at risk right now. Trump has, said he wanted to pivot the program. We are funded for this year, but we'll pay attention to see how that evolves.
Right.
But that's essentially like $1.7 million at risk for our organization. Like that's a problem,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So we'll be paying very, very close attention to that. You know, we're funded by, you know, Fed, state, and local city and county funds, as well as like foundations. And like you said, all the fundraising we have to do to kind of meet the delta of what, you know, the subsidies are not paying for, you know, with the model.
Right.
You know, the other thing we're paying attention to locally right now is Proposition C. You know, that's funds that help with permits or supportive housing. So we're, again, with this shift to really wanting to, you know, not see folks out on the street. There's been a lot of local political discussions around moving some of the allotments of those funds and placing them more heavily on like shelter services and things of that sort. Then that would, of course, have a really negative impact on the work we're doing and the future work we would do as well. So those funds pay for, or they help pay for, they're part of like the capital stack of new construction projects for permanent supportive housing in San Francisco.
Okay. What are you excited about as you move forward? You've been there for 2 years. I would, you know, sometimes my one business coach says we greatly overestimate what we can get done in 1 year, and we greatly underestimate what we can get done in 5 years. Have you allowed yourself to think out to that? I'm sure you do strategic planning and things, but like, what's on the horizon? What excites you about what could be?
Yeah, well, I'm really excited about, well, to be transparent, we had a really bad San Francisco controller's audit that covered like 2019 to beginning of 2023. You know, I came on board June 2023, and then had to kind of work through all of that. And we're still working through all of that, but I'm really excited that, you know, we're going to have 95% of those deliverables before the controller's audit by the end of this month.
Very good.
And the controller's audit has, the controller's office has agreed to review that documentation and give us feedback, and also help us understand whether or not we can move, you know, from these tier statuses by the end of August.
Nice.
And so that's huge. That's very huge. I'm really also excited about the work we've been doing on our property management side of the business. As you can imagine, coming out of the pandemic, during the pandemic, nobody was paying their rent. I mean, I think we were like 60% of folks weren't paying their rent. And that wasn't a permanent supportive housing thing. That was like an everybody thing.
Yeah, that wasn't everybody thing. Yes.
That wasn't everybody thing. But it really impacts us because those funds directly impact our operational, you know, our operations in our buildings. And so we're, in April, we're able to get that down to 29%, which is phenomenal in our rent delinquencies. And our vacancy rate was down to 6.7%, which is amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, for this product, and considering like we don't have full control over, you know, filling our vacancies, right? We rely on the coordinated entry program through the city. We rely on the San Francisco Housing Authority. The last 2 years, we've really doubled down on those relationships and working really closely on our process and procedures with them, and have really seen that pay out. And you don't get paid if you don't have folks in your units, right?
Yeah.
So it's huge for us to get to that percentage. And also it's honestly like an amazing metric to hit for the product that we have. So really proud of that work and how we're starting to shape ourselves up to being a really strong property management business as well. And so part of my strategic vision for the organization is that we expand on that, you know, like this work that we do in terms of the property management side of the business and even the resident services sides, it's not, you know, it's not glamorous at all. You know, working with our population is not easy. People don't raise their hand and say, me to do this work. So you see a lot of property management companies that are intentionally not getting in this business or are exiting it. And I feel like that's a real opportunity for HomeRise, for us to continue to tighten our controls and really stabilize our business so that we could then go in and help other businesses and do third-party, fee management for other organizations that do permanent supportive housing, not just in San Francisco, but beyond as well.
Yeah. I also forgot in the front end of this to invite people to comment and questions. So if you have any comments or questions, please feel free to put them into LinkedIn or YouTube or Instagram, wherever you're on watching us. If you're live, you've got the ability to do that, and we can see those pop up here. And we have our crack Chief of Staff, Fawn, sitting in the background, who can answer for me and we can answer you live. So, what do you do? You're in a real burnout kind of a job where, is everybody that does the kind of work you do, that works in your agency. So how do you fight that, like getting sucked in so much that you just can't let go? How do you balance all of that? And balance is an elusive word. And what have you seen people that do that work do for themselves to kind of pull back and give themselves some grace?
Yeah, I think as you said, like, balance is an elusive word.
Yeah, there is no such thing.
Yeah, and when you're turning around an organization, it takes all of you, like, full stop. And you have to lead by example, so I work really long hours. I just do, like, HomeRise is my baby. I think about it all the time. I've been incredibly involved in operations as a CEO, which is not typical, but it was what was required the last 2 years. And because, we did a layoff in October of 2023. So I came in June of 2023, and we did a layoff in October 23 because we had to. We had to. We were having trouble making payroll, and our income wasn't supporting the structure of the organization the way it was. So we had to get back to the basics and get as lean as possible. So I expected burnout for me. I expect to be tired. I expect I expect that, and so that's not something that I worried about. I gave myself grace in terms of how I felt. And then I made sure that I was being a kind individual to people, that I was being a fair individual to people. I was definitely hard-nosed, still am hard-nosed, because that's what's required. But we have like an excellent, very generous leave package. I would say it would rival what I had in the federal government.
Nice.
And I encourage people to take it. If you are starting to feel like you are unbalanced and you cannot, work at the pace that you're working at, and take your leave, do what you need to refresh yourself. I would, I work a lot, but I would, I have a very long commute home. Oftentimes that commute is a very quiet commute. Because I need time to decompress and to process my day. So when I walk into my house and I see my 3 children, they get the best of me, without the work stuff tied to it, That's all very important. There's like hot springs that I like. They'll take like half a day and run up and jump in a hot spring and then come back down and be refreshed. So there's, some things that I do like that help me immensely. I wish I could get back into exercising. I used to be a gym rat back in the day, but that's just fallen off.
By the way, yes. Yeah. There's always something that something's got to give, and what's it going to be?
But I feel like it's, if I do good now and I do right and get us on the right track, then later I can breathe more, right? So it's a sacrifice, and I don't think you can come into these kind of gigs and not think you're going to make some personal sacrifices.
I think you're right.
To make things happen.
It's interesting. Most of us are raised to like go full on. Well, if we had achiever types of parents or around us or whatever, if we're achievers and we're wired that way, it's like go, 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 go. And then we usually go until the body's like, hey, you're not minding your business. And most of us go like, shh, 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 until the body goes into disease or sickness or something, is like, there you go. Now you'll take some time off, won't you? And I even think in the US, we have always encouraged people to work sick, which is not a great thing. I thought that COVID was going to break us of that habit, but I feel us sneaking back into the old patterns of what we did before the pandemic. And I think it's made it worse in some cases, and businesses like yours, or organizations like yours. Yeah. I don't know where I was going with that, but yeah, it's a lot. And it would be great if we could work in the breathing room along the way, rather than waiting until the body said full stop.
That's so true. I mean, like, but there's other like business oriented things that we have to be sharp at to help kind of balance that as well. You know, one of which is like really trying hard to be fully staffed, you know, like, so even with our financial situation, you know, we had like a cap. Like we knew like if we could pay so much of salaries, we'll be able to pay our salaries, you know, and not have to be a problem, you know. And it's like, okay, well then let's make sure that we're always pumping through staff and being really strategic about where we're hiring that staff to make, you know, because when you're doing 3 people's jobs, that's a problem. You know, it's very much a problem, you know. And I can't say HomeRise hasn't, you know, ever done that. And we still sometimes, I mean, I'm personally doing it myself, you know.
Everybody has moments.
Right, you know, but we have to be intentional about where we're going to allow that breakage, you know, and intentional about making sure that our staff feel supported and that we're not asking, you know, more of them than what's reasonable, you know. And I think that starts with, you know, our hiring managers making sure that they're on top of, you know, getting those requisitions and interviewing, you know, getting the right candidate in the door and all that sort of stuff, and doing it in a timely manner. So that's been something that, you know, we've been paying attention to a lot, particularly in the last year, is really staying on top of, you know, the hiring process.
Yeah, there's so many roles out there in the world that, you know, I look at LinkedIn a lot and kind of live on LinkedIn, and there's so many open roles and there's so many people looking that cannot find work. And you know darn well they could do the job. And I'm like, there's something broken in our hiring process. But I think in your case, it's a tough job and it's not for everybody. And you better have a pretty stable foundation under you that you can rely on, because caregiving and just, I'm going to call it caregiving, even though I don't think it's traditional caregiving per se. It is. There's aspects where you're just always helping other people. And a lot of times people that are wired that way do not reach out for help themselves, don't accept it when offered, and just keep going till that full stop. So I'm always watching for those kinds of things in organizations. I love that you said you try your best to keep the staff keep the numbers fully staffed, because I think that's just a habit we've gotten into places. And, you know, what we tend to do is cut the lower paying jobs when maybe that's not where we ought to cut. I don't know that that's the case in your organization. I'm thinking corporate, like the place you want to go. But what are the kinds of things that you're building legacy? So when the time comes for you to move on from there, what do you hope you have accomplished?
You know, I want to hand someone a very stabilized organization with revenue streams that make up for what the city government and the state are not going to do, you know? So like thinking creatively around like, how do we continue to support our residents, and really like San Francisco and hopefully beyond, right? The Bay Area. We hope to start doing work in the other, you know, 8 Bay Area counties as well. And have, you know, revenue streams that are actually sustainable. You know, that's my goal. I want my staff to continue to feel empowered to do the work that they're doing, And not just empowered to do the work that they're doing, but also empowered to grow in our systems, right? Because let's be honest, like, we have positions that are making a year, desk clerks, case managers. The work that folks are doing it's hard work, and it's not well paid, So we need to make sure that, there's people who are going to want those jobs, are going to stay in those jobs. That's fine. But if we have even our staff who have that desire to rise up, to further educate themselves, to move up, in the organization, that they feel like they're supported to do that they have the training to do that. That's really important to me.
Yeah.
And to help each individual, help better take care of themselves and their families as home risers.
Yeah.
So
I like the home riser. That's cool.
Yeah. And so that's really important. And it's a human thing, right?
Yeah.
It's how we take care of each other and how we support each other. And like I said, there's some folks who are going to be perfectly happy being in those jobs forever. And that's great. They've got a means to take care of themselves that way. That's wonderful, But for those who want more, I want them to have more. And I want them to know that like HomeRise will be there to support them in that growth. And so we've really been working through like individual training plans for each position, which, wasn't existing before. And making sure people are getting that support and that time to grow themselves, and then also to apply for that next level up job and be considered for it, to interview for it, hear what those interview questions are like, hear what, is required and what we're looking for, in terms of like culture, leadership and all that sort of stuff, so that they can start kind of internalizing that information and using it to grow themselves. So that's all been really important.
Definitely. So what haven't we talked about that you'd like to talk about? And then I'm going to move into how people can help if they want to get involved. What we talked about.
Let me see what else. I think we've kind of covered a lot. I think, one big thing I think if I drive home, anything is how important, permanent supportive housing is, that it actually works, when it's implemented with like true fidelity to the model, with compassion. And that fidelity also means funding it correctly. That this model saves lives, and it really restores dignity, at an individual level for the folks who, live in our housing, are part of our communities. So I really feel like this next chapter really has to focus on, how we continue to make our organization is not just HomeRise, other organizations who carry these permanent supportive housing properties in their portfolios in their communities. How do we make ourselves like more resilient? Like how do we like evolve with this environment where, folks are not concerned right now about permanent supportive housing. They just don't want to see homelessness on the street.
Yes.
So how do we evolve with this shift in our culture, where it's a little on the selfish side, and the funding is starting to back that as well. And then how do we advocate and help people kind of understand that we need both, we need both. It's not one or the other. So I think that is, I think, what I would really encourage is kind of helping folks deepen their understanding and their compassion around this, and then also help folks understand how they can get involved in helping us with this.
Let's talk about that. So how can they get involved in helping you?
Yeah, so we love volunteers.
Okay.
We would appreciate if folks go on our website and take a look at our website, and you can sign up there for our newsletters. You can sign up there to volunteer, also to donate. Donations are really paramount to the work we're doing. As I mentioned several times today, we're just not fully funded to do the work that we do, and every dollar counts. So if you have it in your heart to become a funder of HomeRise, please do. And we also have lots of volunteer opportunities. We actually have like an open house that's coming up on the 22nd at 666 Ellis. If you're at all interested in that, please, go to our website, shoot us an email at the donate@homerisesf.org, and we'll get you signed up to join us on that property tour.
Nice.
Yeah, and please, on social media, follow us, share, help us really change the narrative around what folks are saying about HomeRise or saying about permanent supportive housing in general. We really need to elevate our success stories and share our honest challenges as well, and show through our data and lived experience that the housing first approach model works, it's effective, and frankly it's essential for meeting people where they're at and helping them live independently, successfully, and be great citizens, right? So
yeah, and things are coming up in the comments too, so whether you're watching this live or on recording, we are putting all these things into the comments so that you can catch them later and click those links. So Fawn, are there any other links there we go. Okay, so in order to get in touch with you, people can connect to you here at your LinkedIn page, which they should be able to find pretty easily through this too, because I think you're linked. But there is your LinkedIn URL so that they can connect, and they can always reach out by message on LinkedIn. I think we said would
yes,
work.
absolutely.
Very good. Okay, so we're coming down the home stretch here. Again, I'll ask the question, did I miss anything before we hang up for the day?
No, I just want to, show gratitude and just thanks to you, Laurie, for having me and being able to share a HomeRise story. Yeah, and I, of course, I need to shout out my staff. They've been phenomenal. I want to thank them for all their persistence over the last 2 years, frankly, their adaptability, and really their like unshakable belief in our mission. They are why we can do what we do. And I also have to shout out our residents because they are who we do this for. We're in service to them. And we would not exist without them. So our residents have been our partners in shaping the programs that we run to support them, and giving us feedback on, how to make their living, that much better, that much more beautiful, that much more dignified. So I want to thank them for that. And we have some, funders and partners who've just been standing by us through the thick and the thin. And so I want to thank them for their continued support and the momentum that they've given us and runway that they've given us to continue to do this business, particularly while we stabilized the organization these last 2 years. We definitely had some funders who ran, and we had some funders who stuck their feet in and dug in, and we had some new funders who came in a big way, and they're like, hey, like, Janéa, we got you, and made like significant support to us so that we can continue to right this ship, which is like HomeRise is just such an important asset to San Francisco, and they believed in us, and we're showing them how thankful we are by having the successes that we've had. And then I also, of course, have to shout out my board of directors for having the faith in me to come and lead this organization through this really critical time, and their like strategic guidance and their leadership in this, really pivotal moment has been exceptional. And I want to thank them for their trust in me to do this work.
Absolutely. And now you can put things like turnaround expert and just all around good human on your resume and LinkedIn profile and all those kinds of things, because it does take special kind of people to walk through the fire that you walked into. And I loved when you said you were going to write an article about 2 years of leading HomeRise with purpose, grit, and vision. And I think you have nailed it. And so has your team, your board, and all your funders and your residents. Everybody's nailed it. So keep on keeping on, one foot in front of the other. I want to thank you for coming on, taking your time. And for those that are watching that tried to watch us last week when the internet had a big glitch in it, right as we decided to go live, and have joined us here today, thank you for circling back to us. We really appreciate that. There's some things you can't control, and the internet outages are one of them. So everyone have a good day, no matter where you are. And thank you again.
Thank you.
Okay.